The name of today's talk is Radical Gratitude, and it will be coming from a talk that is also the same name. The song was Grateful, a Love Song to the World, and that was by Nimo. Nimo is an incredible artist. He was obviously the rapper guy, and featuring Daniel Namod. And as I said, I will put the link, as I always do, in there so that you can listen to it again yourself. So we will be talking about radical gratitude. We will be talking about how gratitude rewires your brain. So I was saying before, why I like both of these is that one of it comes at it from a scientific point of view about the benefits of gratitude and what it physically does to your brain. And the other one comes more from a metaphysical and spiritual point of view. So we're going to have both of those today. We will obviously be having scriptural references to gratitude. And so we have two different stories on how to look at gratitude in a new and different way than we usually do. So we will have part 2 of the letting go next week. We had letting go last week, and I said it would be this week, but I didn't realize we were that close to Thanksgiving, and I really wanted to do one on gratitude today. We're still in this series, Trusting the Process, and we are 4 days away from Thanksgiving, so that's just amazing. So we're going to start with how gratitude rewires your brain. And this is by Christina Costa, who is a professor and a researcher in positive psychology, resilience, and well-being. So she says, when I was in middle school, I was a science teacher, and I often asked my students to kiss their brain. She had a friend who was a kindergarten student, and she would ask those students to kiss their brain. So they would put their finger to their lips and then put it to their head. And she said, yes, it was just as cute as you can possibly imagine. And so she decided to take that practice and give it to her students as well when she was teaching middle school. And then they began to kiss their brains. She taught them to do that for all of the good work that they do as a practice of gratitude. So later, she went to graduate school. She was getting a PhD in psychology. She did research in the area of positive psychology. That is the part of psychology that investigates the strengths and factors that allow individuals and communities to thrive. She was also teaching high school at that time and undergraduates. She says she loves to teach science, all kinds of science. She's really a good teacher and loves to teach, but her very favorite thing is to talk about the brain. She didn't think that that phrase was appropriate for adults, so she didn't do it when she was teaching college students, but she didn't end up using then that phrase for 3 years. So when she wrote this talk, she said last year she had a terrible migraine. The left half of her face went numb. All right, so last year she had a terrible migraine. Her left half of the face went numb and she started to have blurred vision. She said it kept happening, and so she went and she saw multiple doctors to find out what was going on. And then she started having dizzy spells. So she went to a neurologist who ordered an MRI. And she said she was so excited because now when she was teaching the brain, she'd be able to use her own brain scans to all of her students, and she'd be able to see this is what it really is, that this is my brain. But when they got the results of the MRI, they called her and said, immediately go to the ER. There was a large mass in the right hemisphere of her brain. She said she had never been so scared as she was that night. Tears were streaming down her face. She said, I kissed my brain for the first time since I was teaching high school. She said, I've made it my mantra. I kissed my brain every day leading up to and after the surgery. So 2 weeks after the surgery, the pathology reports came back and she had an anaplastic astrocytoma. The weeks following were very, very difficult. She tried to figure out what she was struggling the most by looking back on all the writing she did. She had done a lot of writing during this time, and she actually was on Instagram. Her first post on Instagram after she got the diagnosis was, I will keep fighting, I will keep loving, I will keep living, I will keep loving, I will keep living. A week later, I wrote this, fighter. I tried it on to see if it felt right because I kept hearing those words next to my name, like a job or an identity, like a role, fighter. I looked at myself in the mirror and it felt okay at first, but soon it became exhausting, too heavy to lift, too much to carry, too burdensome to bear. I took it off and left it on the floor. War was not for me. A body is not a battlefield. I realized that I had been introduced to the fight narrative because whenever people heard their diagnosis, they talked about her being a fighter. You're a fighter, you can do this, keep fighting, you can beat this tumor. Those were all the top comments that she got. She says, I understand others' perspective. There are lots of hashtags of those who had cancer and were fighting, but I was looking for one that said, hi, I have a brain tumor that might never go away, and I'm still living and thriving. But she said she never found any like that. I guess it didn't have a ring to it. I hated the idea that I was going to be at war with my own brain because I had spent months and years kissing it. I hated the suggestion of naming my tumor something awful. It was going to be my neighbor for the rest of my life. I hated the guided imagery training that asked me to picture chemo as an army coming to fight my cells because I didn't want to spend years of my life at war with my own body. I can see how the elements of fight narrative can be empowering for people, but for me, I just knew it wasn't going to work. I started looking at trying to find my own kind of way. I had read so many studies and stories on resilience, but I had never pictured the day would come when I would have to personally battle with it. I read and I taught about gratitude practices specifically as a well-being strategy. Even though I knew about the positive effects of it, I had never actually practiced these gratitude practices myself. She said, I started to incorporate them into my life, to stop focusing on what my body had done wrong and focused on the gratitude that I had for my body. Gratitude became a tool, a restructuring way for my vision to change, for the disability and the illness when the world was telling me I should fight it. Instead of wondering if I would be able to have kids, I thought of how amazing my brain was that despite its trauma, it was able to deliver the perfect amount of hormones to produce the eggs that I could save for later. Every time I went to radiation, I focused on healthy cells would be able to repair over time and the cancer cells would not. When the operative notes came back after the surgery, I read them out loud. I was sobbing happy and grateful tears thinking about what my neurosurgeons had done. I started to feel immense sense of gratitude for the science, for the medicine, for my medical team. They drowned out the what is my life going to look like narrative. The more I practiced gratitude, the more peace I felt. And the more I was excited about the science of gratitude at the neurological level. So there are many positive outcomes from gratitude. Psychologically, there is positive emotions and enhanced mood. Socially, there is more empathy and a stronger relationships. Physically, there is stronger immune system and less pain. There are several parts of the brain that are activated when you express gratitude, but the number one is the medial prefrontal cortex area that is associated with negative emotions. The changes in the neurotransmitters and hormones, combined with activated neural pathways, allow us to cognitively restructure potentially harmful thoughts. We can intentionally activate these circuits in our brain. The more we do something, the easier it becomes. The more we activate the circuits, the less effort it takes to stimulate the pathways, and the stronger the pathways become. Neuroplasticity, we've talked about that a lot. I've talked about that with you before, about building new neural connections. So gratitude wires and fires new neural connections to the bliss center, which then enhances the production of serotonin and dopamine, which then regulates the stress hormones and helps with the cognitive restructuring by practicing positive thinking. I kept practicing gratitude, thanking my brain for the amazing work it does. I started doing gratitude affirmations every day. I kissed my brain every day. I did a gratitude journal list every single morning. I wrote thank you notes to the people in healthcare, the nurses, the anesthesiology resident who held my hand during the whole procedure, the radiation therapist who created the perfect playlist for me, the administrative staff who always made me smile whenever I came into the hospital. The universe may think it's funny that a psych researcher and instructor who studies resilience and well-being ended up with a brain tumor. We do need to have more research. She said, we don't know how the tumor is going to behave over time. But she says, I'm grateful for unexpected challenges. I don't want to dismiss people who find the fight narrative helpful. And I don't want to suggest that it's easy to find ways to be grateful in dealing with adversity, but I believe that there's another way. Loving your body doesn't have to be conditional. You can love it even with all of these things going wrong. You can do this by being filled with gratitude, by practicing gratitude, by wiring our brains to help us to build resilience. He said, so I ask you right now, take a second to kiss your brain and thank it for all that it does for you. All right. All right. We're going to move on to scripture. So we will have scriptural references to, yes, my kitty is here. We will have scriptural references to gratitude. So we're going to start with Psalm 118:24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Hebrews 12:28. Therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe. Acts 24:3, in every way and everywhere we accept this with all gratitude. 1 Thessalonians 5:16, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Colossians 4:2, continue steadfastly in prayer, being watchful in it with thanksgiving. 1 Chronicles 16:24, oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. And Psalm 28:7, the Lord is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts, and I am helped. My heart exults, and with my song I give thanks to him. All right, so we're going to move on to the story of another incredible, remarkable, strong woman, and her talk was called Radical Gratitude. Her name is Janice Shelfer. She is a radio personality in Florida that has been doing not so much talk shows, but shows where she tries to uplift and inspire people for the last 12 years. So she says, I'm Janet Banana, and I'm living lucky. So her first day in kindergarten, she lived in a very, very small town. And so the music teacher was actually her mother. So her mother called them all into the room, all the little kids in kindergarten, and asked them all to line up and says, come on over here, Janet Banana. And Janice said, I was horrified that she used that little pet name, in front of everybody else. I just couldn't believe it. I thought it was the worst thing that could ever happen to me. But on the second day, her mother, the teacher, asked everybody to line up, and she asked everybody, what is that person's name? What is that person? And no, there was dead silence. Nobody could remember anybody's name. They pointed to her, and they all said, Janet Banana. So she realized that it actually was a really good thing. She says, you can't always control the circumstances, but you can control how we perceive them. I'm going to share the tool called radical gratitude, where you are grateful not only for the highs, but also for the lows, the challenges, the obstacles, and the adversities in life. Her mantra is, life is always working in our favor. So when she was a 15-year-old freshman in high school, she was in varsity basketball. She was a very team leader in varsity basketball. Her team won third in the state. She was a featured baton twirler in the band. That year, they actually played at the Air Force Academy homecoming game. But on 5/23/90, she was in a passenger car accident and she broke her back. She felt like there was a rubber band around her chest, and she was afraid that everything below that was going to be paralyzed. She was waiting for the ambulance, and she said, please don't let me be paralyzed. She was taken to the hospital. They did surgery. She was in the ICU, and she stared up at the ceiling crying, thinking, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. Her friends were talking about their dreams and their sports. They would come to visit her, and all her friends would be complaining about running lines. And she said, I just wanted to remember how to do that, what it felt like to throw up a baton, to do gymnastics, to go to dance lessons. And then she realized that she had just started to be interested in boys. And she said, who is going to want to date me? I can't walk. I can't feel anything. And her thoughts started spiraling out of control. She was sitting in the lobby in the rehab when a boy, a quadriplegic, came buzzing by her in his electric wheelchair, and he started flirting with her. And he said, scratch my nose for me. She said, I thought that was totally gross. That was the last thing I wanted to do, but he was very charming, and I kind of felt bad for him, and so I scratched his nose. And he says, you have no idea how lucky you are. How lucky am I? How lucky am I? She says. When was the last time you asked yourself that question? So for the first time since the accident, she looked up at the ceiling that night and she got out a pen And she made a gratitude list. She has her hands, she has her arms, she had fingers, she had mobility because by now she had a wheelchair she could get in and out of. She had family, she had a great personality, she had talents, she was able to captivate an audience. But she says the biggest gift was her shift in perspective, focusing on what I had, not on what I lost. Instead of focusing on the disability, I focused on all of my abilities. What resulted was one of the biggest success cycles that she could ever have imagined. She entered the Kansas Junior Miss competition. She was the only one in a wheelchair who had ever entered the competition, and she won the competition. She started meeting presidents and being on talk shows. She started being asked to be on the speaking circuit. She started traveling internationally. She got a gold medal in Athens for wheelchair basketball in the Paralympics. She got her dream job of being the radio personality that she is now, called Janet Banana. But she says her biggest jackpot was her husband, Jason. So the three things that she was most worried about, sports, inspiring others, and falling in love, all had come to fruition. She said, once again, life always is working in our favor. She said, it was the hardest 14 years of my life, but for the most part, there was an upward trajectory, and the biggest ingredient was gratitude. She said she hit a point in her life where she needed to evolve, and so did her gratitude practice. She wanted to learn this new way of doing it, and so she discovered this new practice called radical gratitude in her 30s because she had hit a plateau. She said, am I just grateful or am I settling? My friends were having kids and starting families. I found myself drowning myself in wine. I was hanging out with an inner circle where we had complaining competitions. My finances and my career became stagnant. I asked for pay raises and a promotion, and I got lectures like, aren't you just grateful to have a job? Do you know how many people would do your job for free? And the most absurd one at all, you live in Florida, we pay you in sunshine. How ridiculous is that? She said she was tired of going the extra mile just to get to the starting line. Life was wearing her down. A little voice inside of her started saying, Jana, there's something bigger and better out there. She tried to ignore it, but that little voice kept saying, Jana, there's something bigger and better out there for you. It started manifesting itself physically. She started getting sick and not being able to sleep. She started having panic attacks and anxiety. And her husband said, I think you need a vacation. So they went to Tanzania, one of her favorite places to go on safari. And so the driver, as they were on safari, said, look over there, look that far distance. And in the far distance, far, far away, so small that they looked like ants, was a whole line of elephants, trunk to tail, trunk to tail. Where are they going? She said. And he said, somewhere very special. So she pulled into their camp at night. They were getting ready good night's sleep so that they could get up really early in the morning to go into the bush. But when they woke up the next morning, she was feeling really sick, and she said she didn't want to go. So she stayed in bed, and they all said, okay. So she stayed and she rested, and she was in bed, and then she heard this walkie-talkie say, don't move. You are in extreme danger. So she got out of the bed. She got herself into her wheelchair. She went to the edge of the tent, and she pulled open the tent just enough to see, and she was surrounded by elephants. 30 to 40 of the elephants had all surrounded her tent. They were directly in front of me. There was a baby elephant that was 6 feet away from me. The mother was hovering over it. She said that baby elephant locked eyes with me. I felt the energy. It was calm and peaceful. I believed there was something bigger and better for me. My intuition, that voice that had been telling me that. I had a knowing, a certainty. I just knew it was time to grow. What Michael Beckwith often refers to as a moment in which conditions are met in order for you to fulfill your highest potential. The inspiration I needed was there in order for me to break out of my complacency bubble. At that time of my life, like many people, I had been collecting disappointments, negativity, rejections, toxic self-talk. I reflected on all of these and listened to my inner thoughts. I went home. I decided to quit my job and make some changes. I was quickly paralyzed by fear, doubt, and uncertainty. What are you quitting your job for? Because you saw an elephant? Are you crazy? What are you going to do? How are you going to pay your bills? Are you losing it? She said, I'm embarrassed now. I'm ashamed. I don't have a plan. I start cutting myself off from my friends and family. I stop going places. I start questioning all of my beliefs. I'm isolating myself. I'm not leaving the house. I start making really bad decisions. I stopped exercising. I started eating crap. I gained 33 pounds. One day, while I was trying to transfer into my wheelchair, I fell and broke my leg in 3 different places. Here she was again, in bed, immobile, powerless, and dependent. She was looking at that damn ceiling again. Only this time she was looking through the distorted lens of a dark, depressed 40-year-old. How lucky am I? Almost sarcastically, she started writing down all of the crappiest things that ever happened in her life. She's so grateful to be so severely depressed that she can't even get out of bed. She's so grateful that she can spend her life paralyzed. She said the word stopped me in my tracks. The wound is that deep. I never thought I would ever write down that word. I'd always found gratitude for my ability, but I never thought that I would be grateful for my disability. As my hand started writing, what came out was astonishing. The gifts that have been given to me in my life have been so beautiful, from deeper connections, the love, all of the caring and the compassion, the opportunities, and the unique perspective, the ability to help others, pursuing music and art. My husband. As I went down the list, I am so grateful for my depression because it allowed me to know God. The things that I perceive to be the worst things in my life have led me to the things that have made me the most proud to be me. Adversity is your advantage. When you're grateful for it, there's power because it will help you unveil a new level of ability. It's called invincibility. Next time you face an obstacle, a struggle, a pitfall, ask yourself the questions that lead to radical gratitude. What's great about this? How can I grow? How is this serving me? So here's what I know. It takes discipline and commitment to do a gratitude list every single day. Sometimes you're late for work. Sometimes you get distracted by something else. Sometimes you're not feeling well, but it's relatively easy to do it. Both these talks expressed a commitment to being grateful for adversity, the hard stuff. We don't want pain or loss or sickness or financial insecurity or a job that isn't what we believe would be a great job. Christina talked about the scientific, physical, real life, tangible, observable benefits of rewiring your brain by having gratitude practice. Jenna talked about how to practice radical gratitude. As we come into Thanksgiving, let's try to do the not so easy practice of being grateful for all the things in our life which we perceive to be negative. Remember, perception is the key. There are 2 sides to every coin and every situation in life. I have talked about my rocky, turbulent, painful marriage and how I didn't get a divorce because I was scared to death of seeing the man, and how after he died, because we were legally still married, I now receive his Social Security check. There are numerous areas in my life where something seems really awful, but what is the other side of the coin? Let's try to answer the questions Jenna posed. What's great about this? How can I grow? How is this serving me? That's radical gratitude. Not just acknowledging all of the blessings in our lives, but also all of the challenges, which are creating new, brighter, better, stronger, more generous, more compassionate versions of ourselves. That's radical gratitude. May you find it this week. Happy Thanksgiving. And so it is. Remember at all times, the power is in you. It always has been, and it always will be.